Hi, Grey Tiger here, and today we take a short break from the Race Mechanics series to do a bit of speculation on the coming Wood Elves DLC. Over the next couple of days, I'll release videos addressing different aspects of the DLC and what might be coming. Since the Wood Elves are confirmed as one of the races, we'll start with them, by taking a look at the likely legendary lord, an alternative I'd like to see, some of the units we might get, possible mechanics, and map starting positions. So grab your bug spray as we enter the realm of the Wood Elves. So, we all know who the favourite legendary lord for the community seems to be. The Sisters of Twilight, Naistra and Arahan. But are they the most likely? We know that CA has stated in the past they would not be possible. That was back in Game 1. So have things changed enough on the back end, or have they figured out a way to implement them that the community would accept? Let's take a look at the possible ways they may be implemented, then list some pros and cons, and possibly determine how they may find their way into the game. So here we have what I think are the three most likely implementations. If I have missed one, please let me know. Our first option, we might see them come as a single entity with two models, much like Skarsnik and Gobbler. The pros: it fits their lore nicely, and it feels like the sisters are this combined force in battle. They would have shared health pool and abilities. Cons: the animations may be quite complex, which I believe was the reason given by CA back in Game 1, and they would be even harder when you add in their mounts. Personally for me, it would be a very disappointing implementation. It works for Skarsnik and Gobbler, as Gobbler is basically his pet. I don't think it would work for the sisters, as who would take the lead like Skarsnik does? It would also feel very restraining to have them effectively glued together. The second possibility is that the sisters come as a pair of lords in the same faction, and have a special rule that allows them to fight in the same army. They would have their own health bars, and be linked together by some passive ability to address their being linked in the lore. This seems more promising, as it takes the animation issue out of the picture, still keeps the lore aspect nicely, and via the special rule has them feel like they are dependent on one another. The beast issue I see here is, can the engine handle two lord characters in one army? This would be my preferred way of having the sisters in the game, as it ticks most of all the boxes. A third option I have heard raised is to have them lead separate factions. This does sound interesting, and can open up some intricate campaign options, but it ignores a large part of their lore, and makes it very difficult to have them together. So I'd put this at the bottom of the list. By choosing the second option, I believe we can have the sisters added to the game in a fun and lawful way that would be possible for the developers. What is your preferred option, assuming we get them as the DLC Lord? Now, there are other popular Lord options, like Araloth, Ariel, and even going back to 4th edition, there is Thalandor and his warpaint mechanic that would be a great addition. I'm not really going to focus on these characters, as many other Warhammer content creators have done so. Instead, I'm going to look at another 4th edition character that I would really love to see added. Now, do I want this character more than the sisters? Well, call me crazy, but yeah. I'd rather like to see this character added to the game, as he also opens up options for a new lord or hero type, and adds the possibility of several new units for the Wood Elf roster. If you've guessed Skaw the Falconer, you'd be right. Now, some of you, or possibly the vast majority of you, may hear that and think, are you nuts? You want him over the sisters? And I may well be. But we each have our favourites and preferences, and having a Beastmaster added to the Wood Elves is one of mine. I also feel he would tie in nicely with the likely opponent in the DLC, Throp the Unclean, a character well known for creating vile beasts for Clan Mulder. I could see Skaw on the one side tasked with protecting the beasts from the Skaven who are trying to harvest them to create their monstrous abominations. They could be intertwined in some fashion, being drawn to the same locations by missions or some mechanic, which has beasts to protect or rescue on one side, or capture harvest on the other. I think it would be a very nice way to have the two factions interact, apart from the normal conquer the other's territory. So, let's take a quick look at Skaw's lore and possible abilities. Elven myth claims that he lives among the topmost branches of a mighty old pine tree, in the company of his falcons. It is there that he speaks to the eagles and other great birds of prey, forming a special bond with them that is deeper than that of most Wood Elves. He is a bit of a recluse from Wood Elf society, avoiding the company of other elves, though he does not hesitate to join them when the forest or its animals are in danger. In battle, he is joined by his trusted falcons. They swoop down from the sky and are more deadly than arrows, with their hooked beaks and sharp talons. Skaw himself uses the flail of claws in combat, with 3 thongs tipped with the talons fixing birds of prey. Unlike a standard flail, which is heavy and cumbersome, Skaw's flail is light and easy to wield, and he can cause incredible damage as he moves with grace through his opponent's ranks. The falcons may be implemented as a multi-use ability that causes damage to opponents in an area around Skaw, and lowers their melee defense and possibly morale. It could be on a 30 to 40 second timer, so you could get a good number of uses out of it in battle. Of course, being a Beastmaster, he would come with those skills too, so we may see him able to call upon additional beasts, or even shift form in battle into a bear or wolf. Instead of unlocking Mance for Skaw, we could unlock additional forms which he can shift into in battle as he gains levels in the campaign. What do you think? A poor choice for a lord? Or not the right time? Now, you may have noticed that I did not mention Drycha. Well, that's because I firmly believe she will come as the bonus FLC Lord that will be limited to the Mortal Empires campaign. I think CA were quite clear with their trimmings comment on that one. So now that we have looked at the most likely Lord, and my personal preference, let's take a look at some of the units we may see added alongside them. Now, the Wood Elves roster is pretty much complete when you look solely at the 8th edition book. Now, there are the obvious variants of Dryads and Treemen that could be added. There are a few small gaps in the elves like Glade Riders with spears, or low tier infantry. And if Beastmasters become a thing, then we have the various beast units that could be included. So let's take a closer look at each of these possibilities. The Dryads currently come in one flavour, vanilla, bland and in need of spicing up. So what options are there? Well, if we look back to the earlier editions, we have different types of Dryads based on different real-life trees. There was the Oak aspect, tough and resilient to wounds. They had a greenish-brown appearance with thick limbs. These could be represented as having higher physical resistance, slower movement perhaps, along with a higher weapon strength thanks to the thick limbs. The Birch aspect, which took on a silvery-white appearance, was more delicate but extremely vicious. It had long fingers that sliced through flesh. These could be represented with little physical resistance, fast moving with armor piercing, or bonus for infantry. The third variant was the Willow. They had an appearance where their branches would droop down around them and be used to entangle the enemies and their weapons, making it nigh impossible to attack them. So we could give them a high melee defense and possibly some passive to reduce their opponent's weapon damage when in close proximity. Now, apart from these variants, we could also introduce a missile version or two that fire out spikes. The base unit could be Dryads with armor-piercing spikes, where a variant at a higher tier could possibly have poison damage. Now, for the elves, we could add the missing Glade Riders with spears that were available on the tabletop but have yet to make their way into the game. It would be a very easy addition for CA, it's just a bit of kit bashing, and give the Wood Elves another cavalry option which they could definitely do with. Now, don't get me wrong, their top tier cavalry is really quite good, but they need a mid-tier option. Now, in the Warden and the Paunch DLC, we received a low-tier infantry for the High Elves. In the Rangers, I think we could also receive a low-tier infantry here, this time with axe and shield, in the form of Kindred. Now, they're an old unit and have not been part of the roster for a long time, but once again they could fill a small gap as an AP infantry melee unit. Now, a number of people have mentioned Zoats. I'm just going to say no. Please no. They don't fit the Wood Elves at all, and would be as out of place as adding a Doom Wheel or a Gyrocopter.
Never enough Doom Wheels!
So, quickly moving on. Beastmasters and Assorted Beasts. Once again, these have not been in the roster since the early editions, but they still fit the bill perfectly. The lore is on point, the aesthetic is there, and there would be several units that could be added to the roster along with the Nord and Hero type. What more could you ask for? I'd expect 3 or 4 types of beasts that could be added as a result, from the low-end wolves and wildcats to great feral stags and units of bears. Each could fill a different role, with the wolves and cats being fast flanking units for dealing with artillery or harassing archers. The great stags could be used more for cycle charging into mid-tier units with AP damage from their massive antlers. And the bears could be the brawlers, able to go paw-to-toe with the front line and tear them apart with armor-piercing and bonus-free infantry. If we don't see Beastmasters and the Beast units introduced in this DLC, then I really hope that CA considers them for a future Wood Elf release during Game 3. I really think they would be a great boost for the Wood Elf roster. Well, that's pretty much it for the possible roster additions we might see. Unfortunately, I don't see any centerpiece big ticket model on the Wood Elf side of the DLC. There isn't even anything we can take from the Monstrous Arcanum really, as most creatures in there are related to other factions, are far too evil to fit the Wood Elves. So let's move on. Mechanics. Well, the first thing that has to change is Amber. I don't much care what they do with it, as long as two things happen. Firstly, you don't lose Amber you have gained from a settlement if you lose the settlement. Apart from being a royal pain in the arse, there's the common sense aspect. I mean, wouldn't you take the most important resource that is needed back in Athelloren back to Athelloren, where it would be safe? You wouldn't just leave it laying around in the settlement you just conquered, where it's of little use. Secondly, you should no longer require Amber to recruit your top tier units. It just cuts you off from having them more often than not, and is just frustrating. Now, what new mechanic may be added to the Wood Elves? Well, I believe we will see a rework of the world routes. It's something that has been brought up time and time again over the years. I've watched a lot of videos where I've seen it talked about, and CA must be aware that the community wants a more fleshed out and meaningful system. Having it as a variant of the underway mechanic was okay for Game 1, but the bar has been raised considerably for what's possible and what the community expects. How will it be transformed? I think we will see hubs dotted around important points of the maps. These hubs are places where the world routes have been damaged, and it's the player's task to repair them to unlock campaign bonuses and to open them up for fast travel access, much like armies could fast travel back in Total War Empire. To repair a hub would either entail sending a hero character there and performing an action, much like the digging for treasure that you can do with the Vampire Coast, or sending an army and occupying the hub and then having to build a certain building chain, with each tier increasing the durability of the related world route. Or perhaps you will just need to collect a certain resource that could be spent on upgrading the hubs without the need to travel to them. I expect to see the second option, though a combination of the last two would be nice. I just don't see it being the first option with a sole hero activating the world routes, as it will be too simplistic. The world routes and the order that you repair them may well be driven by missions that will put you in conflict with Clan Mulder, who may be using them, or in the area hunting for beasts for their experiments. A nice addition would be to have the forests begin to flourish around the repaired world route hubs, even changing the map with more trees and providing additional bonuses to your Wood Elves. It's very unlikely, but much like the Beastmasters, it's something I'd love to see. A system which I think we may see revived from the 6th edition army book is Spites. Nature spirits which are able to change form at will. Spites can be found all through Athelloren, often attaching themselves to a specific location, creature, or individual. They are mischievous creatures, often playing tricks, and are quick to anger, willing and able to do harm to any who threaten their host. Now, on the tabletop, you could choose to assign a spite to a character for X number of points. There are many forms of spite, each granting different bonuses. For example, the terror spites are malicious spites from the dark places of the woodlands. Character with these attached would cause terror. Luminescents leave behind magical spores wherever they land. Attaching these to a character would change their attacks to magical. These could be adapted, so you could receive spites for completing missions or tasks, which can then be assigned to any unit in your army, much like banners can. Spites could rank up with your unit, becoming more powerful as the campaign progresses. Finally, let's move on to possible starting locations for the DLC Lord for the Wood Elves. On the Vortex map, Orion's camp, in the heart of the jungle in the Southlands, makes sense, though since the Warden and the Paunch, that area has become very crowded, with both Emmerich and Grom starting close by. It would make for a very campaign, with High Elves, Lizardmen, Undead, Skaven and Goblins surrounding, so there is that. A possible alternative is up in Nagarond in the Deadwood. This is less crowded, but does it fit the lore as well? The foes are not as varied either, with mostly Dark Elves, some High Elves and Skaven. On the Mortal Empires map, Orion's camp is again an option, with Tomb Kings, Lizardmen, Skaven and Dwarves close by. This would make for an interesting campaign, but would you be too far from your likely nemesis Throt, who would probably be in Hellpit at the opposite end of the map? I think a starting position in Lowland Forest is more likely in this case, to put you closer to Hellpit and Throt. To be honest, wherever the starting position, as long as it's not an Athelloran, I'll be happy. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed hearing my thoughts on the coming Wood Elves portion of the DLC. In the next part, I'll take a look at the likely other half of the DLC, with Throt the Unclean. Until then, thank you for joining me. Please leave a like and sub, and take care. I'm Grey Tiger, and I'll hopefully catch you next time.